Okay, hi everyone. It's just a few minutes right after noon, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into a little brief introduction of USGBCLA today. So can everybody hear me okay? We're all good? Awesome. I get the nods. I'm Farah. I'm with USGBCLA, and we are very grateful for you guys to be joining us today, especially Melissa and Alex, who are about to walk us through the overview of wellness certifications, which I actually need to be listening in on myself. So I'm excited to be here as well. So if you're not familiar with USGBCLA, we're a small nonprofit and we primarily work to build a community of people in the green building industry. So we are mostly working on that. If you would like to be more engaged with us, please feel free to become a member, join a committee. We have mentorship programs that we're doing right now. Volunteering is always encouraged because we always have something that's needing to get some hands on it. We have a lot of initiatives going on as well. Also follow us on social media, gotta make the plug. So we have a few other upcoming trainings and education potentials that are going to be happening, not this month, thank goodness, but next month, early, which is a week away, which is also terrifying. There's a few things like sustainability on Skid Row, which should be really interesting. They're doing a tour of that building. We have another training for the ENVSP. The Net Zero Accelerator meet and greet should be really fun. And then we also have GPro coming up this next month. So if you guys have any other questions or thoughts about maybe wanting to look into what else is available, please come and join us on our talent portal at usgbcla.org/talent. And we have all of our trainings available there, as well as employer spotlights, jobs that are available in our network, bunch of other things that are like from previous trainings. We have videos for that. So it's kind of just like a giant portal of all of our educational needs from our green building industry. But with that, I'm going to hand you guys over to Melissa and Alex to get started. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that Melissa, you can get yours up. And we just want to say thank you again to Melissa and Alex for leading us through this.
Thank you, Farah.
Thanks,
Hi,
Farah.
everybody. Sorry, Alex, go ahead. I'll share my screen.
Go for it.
Give me 1 second here, guys. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hi, Melissa Gutierrez-Sullivan. I am VP of Sustainability and Wellness at Cushman and Wakefield, and I am also the chair of the USGBC LA board. Alex?
And I'm Alex, and I just took a new role as Global Head of ESG for Kennedy Wilson.
All right, so welcome everybody. We're so excited that you're here. We are going, obviously the title overview of wellness certifications. The first half will be well, the second half will be, we're gonna cover Fitwell, and I am going to dive straight in because I'm sure we'll have questions and I don't wanna run out of time here. So introduction to WELL certification. How I typically describe it is LEED certification, as many of us know, evaluates how a building affects the planet. And WELL certification and Fitwell certifications evaluate how a building affects the people within it. So it's kind of that last missing piece of sustainability and sustainability of the people. So when we spend about 80 to 90% of our time indoors, it makes the most sense when organizations, investors, occupants are looking at investing into their company. Investing in people's health makes a lot of sense. Most organizations spend about 10% of their budget on energy and rent, 90% of the 80 to 90% of their budget on staff. So when you look at it that way and you're trying to make an investment, improve culture, health, etc., investing in wellness makes a lot of sense. So WELL certification goes back to two brothers who worked at Goldman Sachs, and they saw this need in the investment banking world around wellness and teamed up with Delos, which is a nonprofit, and Deepak Chopra is part of that organization. And they created the International Well Building Institute, which created the WELL certification. And the interesting part is they teamed up with GBCI, which is the governing body that reviews LEED documentation as well. That fun fact is that originally LEED did have a human component to that certification, but because the A&E community were the folks to pick it up quickly, that human component actually dropped off. And so that wasn't part of it. So it really makes sense now. You have kind of this whole holistic view of sustainability by incorporating the health and wellness of people and not just the planet. And GBCI reviews documentation for both programs. So, oh, and I see that update. That update date is as of today. And let me move over. Can you, I don't know if you guys can see all that, all the videos. So they currently have, this is a picture of a project I worked on in downtown LA. And right now, WELL has about 29,761 projects, which that includes enrolled projects. So definitely growing. It's fun to update this slide because it keeps going up so quickly. These numbers, 2.72 billion square feet in 97 countries. Fun fact about this project here, downtown LA, high-rise building. When we went to test it, and I'll get more into testing in a little bit, they tested the air outside, and the air outside was, the assessor came in and said, oh no, like it's as bad as some of the worst days in China that we've seen, where they can't even like see in front of them. The reason was because they had construction going on outside. And so the air was just really bad, and we were concerned about how that was going to affect the indoor air. And luckily they passed. The furniture, obviously all low VOC, and MERV 13 filters on the base building system. So just good to know information. So the newest version of WELL is WELL version 2.2. They went from 7 categories to 10 categories now with this newest version out. And so air, water, nourishment, light, movement, looking at physical activity, thermal comfort, sound, materials, mind, and community. Community is a new one, is a new category. And so just similar to LEED certification, WELL certification is broken up into these different categories. And then you also have preconditions that you have to meet. Most preconditions address the testing that takes place, and I will dive more into that. And then you also have optimizations where you actually can pursue different points, and so you can achieve different levels of certification. Within those optimizations and within the preconditions, there are different parts that you can pick and choose from. And then also similar to LEED, you can have either silver, gold, or platinum levels of certification. And I don't know if you guys can see this. Sorry, this keeps, all the videos keep getting in the way. So you register a project, you go into WELL Online. It is a very user-friendly platform. You go in, you register, or you can also get a quote to see how much it would cost to register and to certify, as well as a performance verification quote. You go through your project. I have worked on projects that are existing that are not necessarily going through a redesign. WELL only has about 30% of their features are actually design related. Most of their features are operations and policy. So you have some wiggle room there for existing spaces to get certified. And as I mentioned, I have worked on projects that are existing and are not going through design change. And then when you are completed with your project and all the documentation is ready, you submit to WELL Online, and then they have 5 weeks to review, comes back to you. It's same as LEED. You have 5 weeks to respond, 25 business days, and then you resubmit, and then they come back with their final review another 5 weeks. And then at that time, when all documentation has been completed and approved and everybody feels good about it, then you go into the performance verification, which is the testing. And then finally, when that is complete, you get certification, and there is a recertification every 3 years. And that does include going through testing again. And that's to make sure that the space is actually healthy. So here, this is just some overview of the actual website. You go on, you can start your project. Similar to LEED, you're going to fill in your square footage, your address, main points of contact. Here's some of the information that they're going to ask you if you are going through construction. What is your expected completion time? owner information. You can add your team members, etc. Here's the dashboard. This shows you the overview of your project. And then what's interesting about WELL certification versus LEED is the documentation. LEED is very heavy on, you know, the team member documentation and all of the supporting documentation you need to prove that you're actually meeting the requirements. But with WELL, you have a letter of assurance, which is essentially, you know, a PDF that you provide to your team members. So architect, owner, MEP, and GC, and they go in and fill out. So they initial the document, they check off the boxes for the parts that apply, and then at the bottom they sign off on this letter of assurance. And there's no, not for all of them, but most of them, they don't require supporting documentation. That is changing a little bit now with version 2. They've started to ask maybe for more pictures or more annotated drawings, but for the most part, it's a pretty straightforward process. Then you submit all of your documentation to the feature and upload it all into the website. And then here is an example of a project checklist. So you have your feature here, so air quality standards, your different parts to that standard, what the requirements are to each of those individual parts, and then the type of documentation. So performance testing would be where the assessor actually comes in. So what happens is you hire a performance verification assessor. They come in at the end and they test the project's air, water, lighting, thermal comfort, and sound. And as I mentioned, most of those testings are around the preconditions. And then at the end, and then they tell you if you've passed or failed. If it's a precondition and you fail and the project has failed, then you do have to go back in, remediate the problem, and they do have to come back out and retest. And then also there's a policy, you can see here, policy document, and that's really creating, if the organization already has a policy in place, you can use their current policy and submit that, as long as all of the requirements are checked off and you know that they meet the requirements that are stated in the standard. So here, diving a little bit more into the different testing aspects. So for air quality, looking at organic and inorganic gases, particulates. For water quality, dissolved chemicals and suspended solids, light attributes, thermal conditions, and then acoustics. And lately I've seen on the acoustic side more issues or questions than I had when I first started doing WELL projects. But it always depends on the project. So you do have a WELL assessor, which I mentioned. That is the person who comes out and does the testing. So originally when WELL first started, you had to go through GBCI to get the testing agent, but now WELL is allowing outside organizations. So my recommendation is you go out to 3 different assessors and see what the best quote is, like you would in a normal project for like a commissioning agent or something for LEED. And so that is an assessor. And then the project is also assigned a coach, which is a great resource in the website. You can go in, go to the support tab and fill out your question. And I receive a response within 48 hours at the latest. And they are a great resource to have. Sometimes they rely a lot on the standard and say, oh, here, you can look for it here. But it's helpful when you have one-off situations or unique situation that you need a little bit more guidance on. And I'm going to dive into introduction to resources and tools, but I wanted to let Alex chat quickly about the WELL exam.
Thanks, Melissa. So just quick show of hands, send us a note via the chat window if you either have a WELL AP or are interested in taking the WELL exam. And I'm going to see if I can bring up the chat window and just get a quick response from everyone. How many folks have already earned the WELL AP? Or if you have a LEED credential, let us know if you've got a LEED credential. Great. Looks like, and I'm not going to call on specific names, but passed your WELL exam on Monday. Okay, I'm going to call on Miranda. Nice job. That's got to feel
I shouldn't have
great.
typed that.
Sorry.
It's all
I'm going to
good.
call you out. I won't call it the ones
Yay,
that didn't pass.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Very well done. It sounds like Daniela's looking to pass. Mike's got a lead only, interested in taking the exam. Quite a few of you guys next month taking the test, which is great. Great. So sort of a little side note before we dive into the rest of Well and talk Fit Well. First off, for those of you who are on the fence, I think Melissa and I would both echo this sentiment. Earning a Well credential is a great way to advance your career in the health and wellness space. And to Melissa's earlier points, Well has some overlap with LEAD, but it's different than LEAD. And you can say the same about the credential. LEAD has a LEAD credential is valuable because it covers the holistic sort of all aspects of sustainability, including wellness. But a Well credential, especially in this post-COVID world, is doubly valuable because it talks about health and wellness in the built environment and everything that encompasses. And we're just seeing from Kennedy Wilson's perspective, a huge interest from our tenants, huge interest on the part of our property managers and our staff as well on buildings that emphasize human health first and foremost. So to the point of the exam, Melissa talked about the similarities and the test is similar as well. 100 questions, 2 hours to pass, multiple choice. I won't go into that. I did want to direct folks to some resources that are out there. I think Building Green has a great suite of resources. Full disclosure, I'm biased because I helped write a lot of those practice questions that they have on their website. But when the Well exam first came out, I took it a couple times. Melissa's taken it as well. And to the extent possible, I tried to sort of build some of those exam-specific insights into the simulator that Building Green has and the resources that Building Green offers as well. I think we mentioned it at the beginning, but worth repeating, we are planning on having a Well exam prep workshop. My sense was to host it after the exam changes, which is post September 20th. But just quick show of hands for those of you who are interested in taking the test. It sounds like a lot of you guys are taking it version 1 before it switches. Is that right? Just a note via that chat window. Yeah, okay, cool. So maybe what we'll do is circle back with Becky and Farah and team and see if it makes sense to do one before it changes and after it changes. I see advantages to both, but just as a heads up, it is changing in September from version 1 to version 2. Version 2 might be more relevant. I'm told it's more difficult. Version 1 is easier, so you kind of get to pick what makes sense for you.
And Alex, did you say, you mentioned there was a blackout period? So what's the last day to take the?
I think September 6th to the 20th, if I've got those dates correct.
Okay, so September 5th.
Yeah, right. 5th to the 20th of the 2 weeks, it'll be blacked out. There won't be any exam offered while they update the materials. And I too will be taking the version 2 test September 20th, first in line, so I can get some insights as to how it's changed and what's on there.
Alex's memory is insane for anybody on the phone, so he memorizes these questions. It's crazy.
Well, that's practice taking tests. Put it that way.
It's good, yeah, but definitely good materials. I took his class years ago. I don't even want to say how many years ago now it was. It seems like it was yesterday, but and passed flyingly. So thank you. All right, I will hop back in here. So this is just a standard matrix. So Well has different categories you can back up. That you can pursue. So core and shell projects apply, tenant improvement, new construction. And now with the more recent version of Well, they actually, it's one main program, and you can have it apply to your to whatever type of space that you are pursuing certification for. And so here is the guidebook. Looking at verification table. So another example, you can see here some performance tests. This is the type of documentation that is required. Policy document. If it's a letter of assurance telling you whose role needs to fill out that letter of assurance, whether it's the architect or MEP. And just some lessons learned. And I'm sorry that this is not going the way up here. But basically, making sure that at the time of registration that you look at the whole cost. When you get your quote, you look at the registration cost, certification cost, as well as your performance verification, as well as any possible design changes that may need to take place. Building up that relationship, finding an assessor that you like, that you want to use again and again, has been really helpful for me. And building up the relationships with the coaches, that is also helpful. I think that they structure it by region. So if you have a lot of projects in LA, most likely all of them would have the same coach. And then sometimes other coaches pop in and answer questions for you if that person isn't available. It's a seamless process. And that just understanding that the documentation load is not as heavy as it is with LEED. I think oftentimes when people hear certification, team members, architect, MEP, et cetera, or GC might get a little nervous about how that looks or the workload that it all entails, but it's actually easier in terms of time and number of documents that you have to upload. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to quickly hop into these categories. I have the 10 categories here. For those of you who've taken the exam, you know these already. Let me move this over here so you can see it a little bit better. And okay. So looking at the air category first, as I mentioned, a lot of the features addressed are pursued or go through performance verification testing to prove that you meet those requirements. But looking at things like air quality monitoring, green cleaning, ventilation design and particle filtration, improving your air supply, and microbe and mold control. And as I mentioned, a lot of this revolves around policy and operations. So something like microbe and mold control, you may have your engineer on board, the building engineer on board, who's going to go and assess the cooling coils to make sure that there's no mold or anything or rust on the cooling coils. And obviously smoke-free environment, something we've seen through LEED. There is, for as different as it is, there is overlap in the different certifications. Smoke-free environment is obviously one of them. Air quality management and particle filtration. As I mentioned, MERV 13 filters obviously do a great job. If the project I worked on, that was the filter that they had, and outside air was horrible. So just some high level air. And now hopping into water, looking at drinking promotion. Do you have drinking fountains or some sort of a drinking option, water option within 100 feet of all workstations? So in our downtown LA office, we didn't have this included in design. So what we do is part of our operation policy says we have our administrative assistant who sits at the front desk every day, brings over a canister of water to this certain area that didn't have access, wasn't within 100 feet of access to water, to drinking water. And so that's part of our operations on a daily basis. And they are provided with water to get people up and easily accessing it. Looking at Legionella, and then also hygiene support, making sure that the drinking water is, the filter is updated consistently on a regular basis, and that it's cleaned, that the faucet is cleaned, etc. Looking at nourishment, if the project provides food, are they providing fruits and vegetables, an adequate amount of fruits and vegetables? If you have a cafeteria setting, are you putting them in places that make people more likely to grab an apple or an orange on their way out as they're paying for their food or as they're done? Or is it in the salad in the beginning so that folks are loading up on the healthy food versus the non-healthy food that might be available? Portion management, Alex and I, we always, the funny story about, I think it was Google, they tried to reduce their portion sizes, but then what happened was instead of having one plate on their tray, they were putting 2 or 3 plates on their tray. So also figuring out what the culture is and what makes sense for that space is also obviously really important. Nutritional transparency. Does the food that you're providing, if it's a snack, does it show the calories, the sugar content, etc. on the back? And then also providing options for folks who have food allergies or are vegetarian for whatever reason or something like that, making sure that there are also other alternative options. And most of these are not preconditions. There you can pick and choose for what makes sense for your organization and your space. And then light, looking at daylight, it's been proven obviously to increase mental acuity, to make people happier, improves your circadian rhythm. And so making sure that the folks are exposed to adequate daylight. And but in also along those lines, making sure that if you're in an office space that has a lot of daylight, that there's also glare control so that the folks don't have glare on their screens, when the light shines in at a certain direction. Daylight simulation, also looking at occupant lighting control and circadian lighting options. Circadian lighting, I know when Well first started, circadian lighting design, a lot of people were nervous about that. Well has done a great job at creating alternative ways to pursue certain features. So for example, our downtown LA office, one side gets hit great with daylight, but the back side doesn't. And so we were able to meet circadian lighting requirements by offering employees certain task lights that meet the requirements. And then looking at movement. So I like the overlap here with LEED, obviously bike storage, showers and lockers, looking at active furnishings. Is there a treadmill desk in the space, or a way for people to stay active, a balance board, and circulation network. Also looking at stairs. Are the stairs 4 feet apart, or the handrails are 4 feet apart, so that people can adequately go up and down at the same time without being squished against each other, and just making it more inviting. Alex, I'm sure we'll talk about this with Fitwell, but just really looking at, is there daylight coming into the stairwell, or maybe it's good lighting or artwork, just making it inviting for folks to use to improve movement and keep people going. Thermal comfort, maybe a space is really cold. I have clients who have said, hey, maybe our space is oftentimes very cold. It's an older building. We don't really have that much control over the thermal comfort. We're going to offer our employees blankets. I don't know how well that would go now with COVID, but maybe every person, if it's a smaller enough space or however they want to do it, you could be assigned a blanket or desk fan if the space is often hot and it's hard to cool it off. A desk fan or something like that might also be a good alternative. And then looking at sound mapping, sound barriers, incorporating this from the design. We have had projects that they've started to push back now. What I'm saying is earlier in the Well process, they may not have pushed so hard on this, but we're getting pushback now on saying, hey, this needs to be included in the specs. We need to actually call this out from the specs from the very beginning. So how was all of this incorporated into design? Reverberation time is really difficult to get, but randomly on my most recent project, we were able to achieve that. Typically, most of my projects aren't able to achieve reverberation time. Looking at also sound reducing surfaces. One project I worked on was above a restaurant. And so, looking at ways to remediate the sound because the fan and all the systems below us were causing so much noise, it was setting off the sound testing within our space. And so looking at ways to remediate those problems is also something to think about. Materials, material transparency, making sure, obviously no lead and asbestos, looking at waste management. So also in line with LEED there, cleaning products and protocols, green cleaning products, etc. And the mind category, love the mind category, looking at things like biophilia, beauty and design, mental health promotion. What sort of HR policies are there to help folks who have addictions or dependencies on drugs, stress management? Are you promoting meditation, etc.? Tobacco cessation? Are there HR policies around that, and really just getting organizations to realize that the minimum doesn't cut it anymore. They need to step up and provide their employees this whole health and wellness perspective and resources. So we've seen a big increase around the EAP systems, and just the resources that our clients are providing to their employees is so impressive. And then finally, community. So this is a new category to version 2. So looking at the promotion of health and wellness within the space, but also parent support, family support, civic engagement, which I love. Do you allow your employees, do they allow their employees time to go vote, to go contribute to their local community organizations? Do they promote voting? Health services and benefits? Do they have a flu vaccine campaign? And then diversity, inclusion, and then also emergency resources. What is the building's emergency plan? What are the resources? Do they have AEDs within the space? Do they have EpiPens? So just kind of taking it a step further and engaging health and wellness from like a very holistic perspective for the building. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Alex.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Let's touch base on Fitwell. I think before I dig deep into Fitwell, any questions on the well front that folks have, and that might tie into the discussion around Fitwell and maybe how the two systems compare? Anything that you felt like Melissa missed on the well front? We'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end as well.
Yeah, feel free or put it in the chat. Or
here's a good question, Melissa. I don't know if I know the answer to this, from Bridget.
Let me see.
When's the last date to register a well version 1 project?
I don't think you can register well version 1 anymore.
I don't think so either.
They've moved over to version 2.
And what's nice about, so I mentioned the well version 2 exam is supposed to be more difficult than well version 1. Correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, but I think we found that well version 2 as a system is a little easier to navigate than well version 1.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a little bit more robust. But yeah, I think it is easier to navigate. They've updated their online platform and they've made it very intuitive. I'm sure you all have checked it. If you haven't, I highly recommend going on. You can download you can pull up the standard for free. It's all online. It's all right there in front of you. And the platform itself is easier, is definitely more straightforward, and just more resources, which is really nice.
Great. If you have any other questions, feel free to send them our way. We can pause throughout, and again, we'll take questions at the end. I just want to do one more quick show of hands. How many folks have heard of Fitwell? Because it's a newer system, and I'm always surprised to see sort of who has or has not heard of it. So send us a quick note, yes or no, and that'll give us some context as to how much we cover. Oh, cool. We've got, yes, everyone's heard of it, and many folks are, or a couple of folks are Fitwell ambassadors. Great. So a little history on Fitwell. Fitwell was started by the CDC and their wing, the Center for Active Design, a couple years ago. And coincidentally, Fitwell was in development as well was in development and launching. So it's not like these two systems intended to launch around the same time. But over the last, call it 6 or 7 years, both Well has come online and now Fitwell has come online. And there are some parallels between the two systems. I'll try to explain sort of where the differences lie. And Melissa, you can go to the next slide, which I think has a little more detail here. Number one, Fitwell has slightly different health categories. So Melissa talked, most importantly, Melissa talked about how Well includes that on-site performance testing across air, across water, lighting, thermal comfort, acoustics. And that, I think, is one of the value propositions around Well. You get that real-time testing. Fitwell does not have a testing component. So it has similar strategies you have to pursue. It's a point-based system similar to Well, but there are no prerequisites in Fitwell. There's simply the minimum point threshold, and there's no on-site testing with Fitwell. And so to some extent, it's viewed as an easier system, although for certain project types it fits best, and for other project types I think well fits best. Fitwell, it's a point-based system, and if you know a thing or two about it, the points are fractionated. So some strategies might be worth 1.33 points. Some strategies are worth 2.66. People that are familiar with lead and well and kind of using integers, whole numbers, are thrown off by the decimal points. But similar to a lot of the systems out there, it's a point-based system. You have to get to a minimum number of points to hit 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star certification. I think another nice thing that Fitwell sort of offers is their argument is even if you can't get 1-star certification, you can still use the tool to benchmark your building. And we're looking at using this at Kennedy Wilson. We might have some properties that fall short of the 1-star certification for whatever reason, but we can still use the Fitwell scorecard and do a benchmark to see where they stand. There are a couple of categories where I think Fitwell, you could argue, shines a little more strongly than other systems like Well. Walkability is one. Fitwell gives a lot of weight to walkability. And it's generally speaking a more weighted system than Well, in the sense that the walkability credit is worth 6-7 times what some other credits are worth. Whereas in Well, there's more of an even point distribution. Fitwell also gives a lot of weight to lactation rooms, which I thought was interesting. And if you read their documentation, they talk about how providing lactation rooms doesn't just benefit the employee, but it benefits future generations as well. Fitwell also gives a lot of weight to stairs. So one of the first questions we'll ask when we're engaging with a project that's looking to pursue Fitwell is, do you have accessible stairs? Not just in the, tucked into the corner, but stairs that have access to daylight, stairs that have artwork, stairs that encourage participants to take the stairs as often as possible. Go to the next slide, Melissa. Let's see what we got. I talked about the point rating. So 144 points possible, 90 to get you to 1-star certification. I will say Fitwell, one thing I like about Well, Melissa talked about this, Well is not just for buildings. It also touches upon the culture of an organization. So you've got strategies like no emailing after a certain time at night, which I love. You've got strategies like minimum paternity and maternity leave. These are all policy-based credits that Well leans heavily on. I think, therefore, a lot of the tenant improvement projects tend to gravitate to Well because you don't just control the space, the design and construction of the space, you also control the policies, the HR policies, and kind of the culture of the company. Fitwell does not have as many of those culture-focused, policy-focused credits, and I think therefore tends to fit well with existing buildings. Existing buildings, especially that have walkability and some of the amenities that will get you to that 90-point threshold. Now, Fitwell does have some policy-based credits, but they're entirely focused on building policies, not necessarily human resources or culture-focused policies. Next slide. The different categories of Fitwell, I'm not going to list them all off here, but you can just sort of take a look and compare to what Melissa covered earlier with Well. Again, a couple different examples. They both cover food, but in different ways. Fitwell does not have, I had an MEP engineer ask me, okay, where do I engage with Fitwell? And in going through the scorecard together, there aren't many credits that touch on MEP design or engineering. And I think, so that's another differentiator with Well. You have more credits focused on air quality, filtration, ventilation, and so forth. We'll go to the next slide. I always like to geek out on the scorecards. I know it's tiny print, but hopefully you can sort of just see the layout. It's similar to what you'd see with a lead scorecard or a Well scorecard. One-page snapshot of the rating system, location, access, outdoor spaces, so all the different categories in Fitwell listed. You can see the possible points, and then you can sort of see how they weight different strategies. And this is something that you can download as a resource from Fitwell. Both Well and Fitwell, I think, provide access to great free resources that you can access from their website. Here's a screenshot from the Fitwel online tool. And they've taken kind of an interesting approach. You know, if you think about LEED and WELL, a lot of consultants will use, in the case of LEED, like an Excel spreadsheet to track all the different points. And then you kind of take the information from the Excel spreadsheet and use that to enter information on LEED Online. In contrast, Fitwel has this sort of questionnaire. It's a yes, no, or not applicable or uncertain type questionnaire. And you can go through it quickly and hit yes to the answers that you know, hit no to the ones that aren't, you're not meeting or not applicable if that's the case, and it automatically calculates your score. And so I find when I'm working on a Fitwel project, I don't have an Excel scorecard or sort of a master action list that I use to track the information. A lot of it's done directly on the Fitwel online tool, which I think is handy. Next slide. And here shows the summary, the different weighted points. This building's got 101 points, so it's got 1-star Fitwel certification. I also want to just touch upon the Fitwel Ambassador credential. I talked about the WELL credential a little bit. Fitwel also has a credential, Fitwel Ambassador. It sounds like a couple folks have already earned it or have a colleague that's an ambassador. It is a more watered down test in the sense that it's open book and you can take it kind of online anytime. So the WELL credential has a lot more rigor. You could argue maybe more value out in the market, although Fitwel does have a credential that you can take advantage of in this Fitwel Ambassador. Next slide. Another screenshot from the scorecard. What's cool is you can click on these hyperlinks. I know it's, again, small print, but the scorecard has this clean layout online, and yet you click on a hyperlink and it goes into a lot more detail of why they weighted this point, why they weighted this strategy this many points, or why this is an important part of the rating system, why the CDC has determined that this has a big impact on human health. And I found that kind of handy to have this condensed scorecard that you can click and expand and get the detail on. Next slide. So here's the expanded scorecard for one of them. So the rationale, sample evidence, documentation required. In general, the Fitwel documentation is more based around policies and photographs, less based around, well, there's no performance testing and there's no on-site visit. Before I get into a case study, good question from Bill on the 1, 2, and 3-star rating system. I kind of agree with your comment there, Bill, that LEED and WELL have silver, gold, platinum, these different rating systems, these different target levels that sound great and they look great on a plaque. Fitwel has 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star. Not quite as snazzy, but I also sort of like how they approach it. The CDC is a nonprofit. Center for Active Design is a sort of nonprofit based around the CDC, and Fitwel's not meant to be snazzy. It's meant to be more of a practical tool, and the 1, 2, 3 star is sort of what they've got at this point. Melissa, I don't know if you want to talk about the case study here. This was a project that you ran, so, or I can touch upon it.
No, I'm happy to. Yeah, so this is our project, a project I worked on in San Francisco, South San Francisco for Adobe, and they ended up pursuing LEED and Fitwel. They wanted to test it out, and they achieved LEED Platinum and Fitwel 2 stars. So to give you kind of an idea of the overlap there. Just some of the pictures here. I'm going to move this down so you can see better. I love this. It's a tech company. They work crazy hours. So they have various types of rooms and spaces for their employees to kind of relax and jam out. So this is their music room. You can go in there and jam out with your colleagues. They have an arcade room, which is really interesting. The middle picture there, it's kind of hard to tell, but this is a whole garden. They have hired a company that comes and helps them maintain it, but the employees can use it, do use it to plant, you know, herbs and vegetables, tomatoes, etc. And then this is just one of their many eating areas that is also, you know, just fun to look at, great way to build community and get out there and see your colleagues. And I think what we're seeing, at least on my end, is that as COVID, well, it was wrapping up, now it's maybe not wrapping up, right? But as we try to get people back into their spaces, I think we're gonna see more of these types of different types of rooms, different rooms that help employees engage better. Maybe it's meditation rooms. And we've seen that in the past, but I think now employees are going to start to demand it more. If you want me to be back in the office, I need to have a space where I can relax or jam out or play a video game or whatever it is that I need to be like a more whole human being. Here, let me see. Chat here. Have you had experience certifying a core and shell in Fitwell? Because the multi-tenant base building has many policies and strategies. Yes, so I have not worked on a core and shell Fitwell project, but my colleagues who work in DC with our investor clients do work on those types of projects often. And, you know, base building, because they're working with investors. And so, yeah, it is available. I'm trying to see, out of it costs to achieve at least 90 points of one. It is hard to achieve. So I have friends who've worked on a Fitwell project and they couldn't achieve it if the building, and I actually have a project that was in Santa Barbara, but it wasn't a core and shell project, but it was not walkable and it was only one story. And it's a campus project that is not, it's just it's not walkable. There are no restaurants near it or anything, but the 2-story buildings that were on the campus were able to achieve Fitwell. The 1-story building was not, because we were not able to pull from the stairwell points, and we were not able to pull from transportation or walkability. Lead Platinum was a huge deal when it was the only game in town. Interesting how the overlap didn't give. I know that was something I was trying to point out there too. Yeah, it didn't get the 3 stars, and I'll assume the same goes with Well. Lead and Well have more overlap, and I can tell you. So my downtown LA office, the base building is Lead Gold. New construction, and I was able to pull enough from there to get my space that did not design to Well. I was able to get Well Gold, just because I was able to pull enough information from, or enough credits, features from the Lead base building to Well. It just depends. But like I said, for Fitwell, if you are not walkable and you don't have a great stairwell system, it's really hard to achieve. Alex, are you still there? I'd love to open. Yeah, if you guys have questions, that's the end of the presentation. Yep. So just a case study. They are, going back to Adobe quickly, located near Farmers Market. They do have, there's solar, reduced parking. So some of these are more lead focused. Green purchasing policy does overlap. So anyway, that's about Adobe. Are there any other questions? And Alex, I don't know if you're seeing the questions, if you have any feedback.
Yep. I can see them as well. I think you covered all of them. You know, to my point earlier, we'll circle back with the USGBCLA chapter about putting together a Well AP exam prep webinar. It sounds like there's quite a few folks that are interested in taking the test before it changes, so it might be worth offering that.
Question on Well, documentation is first submitted at post-construction stage, so you can speak a bit more about tips and strategies during design and construction to ensure Well commitments are not forgotten. So that same process you would go through for lead, have your team on board from the beginning for Well and for Fitwell, but more so for Well, just making sure that the whole team is engaged, what I'm seeing right now, and what's interesting are the team members might not be the same team members you would have for a lead project, for example. So if you've ever worked on lead O&M, it's more those team members. So you're looking at like base building, engineer. If it's in a high rise, the property management company might be involved. The cleaning folks are involved in the conversation. I highly recommend having a main point of contact internally who's going to provide all of that information and help you coordinate with the various team members, because it's not always necessarily a team member who's part of your design. But it is important to have that checklist from the beginning and making sure the assignments are all there and everybody knows their responsibilities. Let's see here. Question 2, what are the key reasons you are seeing in the market in favor of well over Fitwell? Because Fitwell is more streamlined and cheaper. I'm going to hear Alex's perspective too, but so what I've seen, which was interesting in the tech market, so Silicon Valley, we had a client come to us who said, and this is pre-COVID, so it may have changed a little, but we're seeing, we need to retain and recruit talent. And so we have to have this building be well certified, because the folks that we're trying to recruit, that's what they're demanding. So retainment of employees, recruitment of employees, and organizations who feel like this is part of their overall culture and values. But definitely a little bit heavier, I would say, on the tech side. And I think, like I said, going back to the recruitment and talent. And then also now we're seeing it evolve and Fitwell and well in general become more popular because of reporting. So annual reporting, if ESG, environmental, social, and governance, this falls under that S category. And so I think we're seeing more of that driving it now with just annual reporting and things like that. Also, Well has a program called Well Portfolio, which is very interesting. If the client has a large portfolio, they want to push out well, this really allows you to push it out to scale and at a reduced price. So right now I'm quoting one of my clients, we're working on, should we just do certifications for some spaces? Should we do portfolio? And the cost for them to do portfolio is less than what it would cost for them to certify one building. And well portfolio is a whole other conversation within itself, but essentially it's a great way to push well out to scale for those larger portfolios. Alex,
Yeah, Melissa, I think expanding upon that, it really depends on the client and the project and the individual situation. I think if I had to guess, it's about 50-50 at this point, 50-50 projects, 50% pursuing well, 50% pursuing fit well. And to the points we made earlier, projects that want the value of that real-time indoor air quality testing across water and light and acoustics tend to gravitate toward well, especially for spaces that maybe are owned or on longer leases, because you get the value during the duration of that space. Projects that maybe have a tighter budget, or like I said, existing buildings, may gravitate a little bit more toward fit well, just because the system is structured to work better with those kinds of projects and spaces.
Yeah, and as Alex mentioned, the base building projects tend to go for fit well, and mostly because of the budget. And also the base buildings don't want to go through testing. So.
Yep.
And then I see there's some more questions here.
How about corn shell recertification? Question from Bridget.
Yeah.
I understand corn shell projects are still required to recertify under well.
Yeah, I believe so too. Yep. And I think that changed. I don't think that it was originally the case. Also, the other thing, somebody asked here about the well safety seal, health and safety rating is a new subset. Yes, what we are seeing is that is becoming more popular. Fitwell has its own version called Viral Response Module. And, but yes, I have a lot of clients who are very interested, like you're saying, around COVID. How do we get our people back into our space and make them feel safe? But we don't have a ton of time. and we don't have a huge budget because, by the way, like our budget was already planned a year ago. And so how do we do this? And so, yes, I do have more and more clients. Well, health and safety rating and viral response module came out last year, but I've seen a bigger uptick in interest around it over the past few months. Well, show. And I do recommend it. I think it's an interesting program, especially if you're on a tight budget or a tight timeline. And then it's also a good feeder into well certification. So, hey, I just need to do something now. And so this fills that hole, but and then we'll apply everything that we did. It's essentially a watered down version of well, it's 21 of the features. But then now, okay, now we're ready a year later. Now we're ready to dive into the whole certification, but we've already done these things, which is helpful.
And a clarification on base building. Good question. Base building is just, think of it as the building itself, not the tenant spaces within that building. So a typical example might be, a high-rise building with 30 stories. That building owner and that building structure are referred to as the base building. And then you could have as many as 30 different tenants in the interior. And those would be sort of what they call commercial interior or tenant improvement projects.
Interesting, Miranda, you're saying here that you're seeing Fitwell as a stepping stool to well. So you have projects that are saying, I'm going to pursue Fitwell and we'll do well down the road?
Yes,
Oh.
like 100% of the time. We literally cannot get clients to sign on to well. Every time we do like a certification program or a gap analysis for them, I would say like 9.5 times out of 10, they're picking Fitwell. And we're encouraging them to look at the two pieces, as you guys have said. One is a little more stringent, one is more, you need location-based policies or location-based credits to achieve the certification, but we cannot, I think we have 3 or 4 projects certified in total of our entire sustainability portfolio under well. We had one client yell at us that if we ever brought it up again, they would fire us from the project.
Oh.
There's some very strong reactions to well out there because people feel like they're paying for certification of policies that they're already spending a lot of money in. That's the general feedback we get.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that. I think on the other hand, I would say, yes, you're already doing it. So why? I have a very large, it's about to be official LEED Platinum project on the East Coast, and their mentality was different. They were saying, we do these and we want our employees to know. We want them to know that we are offering these things and that we've done all of this for them and we want credit for it. And I was like, hey, we could submit for gold. And they're like, no, like we want to take the time and actually get credit for all these like amazing things that we're doing. So it's interesting. That's really interesting.
I think that's, to that point, I think that's why they are pursuing Fitwell, because there are a number of things like the CSA pickup and the farmers market and other wellness pieces that they do want credit for. It's that the price tag on well for cert is really deterring many of my clients, and a lot of them again tend to be California clients, which is an easier argument to make for them. But I have a lot in kind of the Midwest and the South that no, this is their first foray into it, and they cannot see the value in tacking that on. Fitwell is the easier sell, and they feel good about it. So I think there's benefits to both, is I guess what I'm trying to say. That
yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, there definitely is. And I have a lot of clients, like you're saying, who do a gap analysis of both. Hey, I don't even know how I'm going to perform in either of these. Like, let's see which one makes the most sense. Like, getting to 90 points in Fitwell, if you are not in a walkable area, is hard.
Very hard,
yep. And so we do oftentimes, more recent in the past year, have been doing both gap analyses just to kind of compare and contrast and see which makes the most sense.
Totally.
Yep.
That's, I guess, the recommendation too. Definitely give them the back and forth comparison. We do that scorecard kind of crosswalks too. Hey, if you're doing LEED already, here's where this stuff comes out and falls into place for you.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we got here. Sorry, I knew this. What is it? Oh, okay. And Alex answered that.
Will safety seal aspects be in version 2 exam? I doubt it, but maybe. Health and safety rating questions? I'm not sure. I would guess it's probably specific to well
Yeah,
overall.
I think you're right.
And also, but there is, like I said, health and safety rating is a condensed version. So I guess because of that, but I don't think that they'll ask you specific questions around health and safety rating. Energy. Mm-hmm.
One just general comment on that last comment is I think some clients are surprised that well and fit well don't address waste. They don't address water reduction. They don't address energy performance. They don't address carbon. They don't address climate change in the direct sense. And I think that the purpose behind these rating systems is focusing on health and well-being of occupants. They figure LEED and BREEAM and Green Globes and Energy Star address all those other things. These systems are specifically targeting health and well-being. And to the question around sort of the virus response module and health safety rating, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in a post-COVID world and how a lot of companies are coming back to the office in September. Because what I like about WELL is it includes that performance testing. But at most, if I'm correct, it's really monthly or quarterly testing that happens on an ongoing basis. And so we've had some clients say, I need testing done every 15 minutes. I need testing done every hour to give people a sense of confidence that the space is healthy, that there's not particulates recirculating. So I don't think COVID has increased the demand for well quite like I thought it would. And I think that has something to do with it.
Are there any other questions? All right.
Perfect timing. My kids just got back from summer camp. I can hear them downstairs. Melissa, great job. Thanks for leading the charge and also putting together the presentation.
Alex. Thank you, guys. And feel free to email either of us with any questions that pop up after. Happy to be of service. Oh, here, I think I have. There we go.
Thank you, slide. Perfect.
All right,
thanks, everyone.
guys.
Have a
Thank
great
you
weekend.
so much.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it.
Our
Thank
pleasure.
you. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, y'all too.